So here we are again, and it's another beautiful day here in England, and it looks like it's still a nice day there in South Africa. Is that right, Mike?
It's clouding over in Durban, and we were just commenting today how the sun is definitely setting a lot earlier these days. So come sort of quarter past, 5:30, it's getting dark.
Wow.
So yeah, winter is coming in.
We were just commenting that the sun doesn't set until 8:30, 9:15 in the evening
But
here.
having said that, Dave, if the sun sets here at 5 o'clock, we still wear t-shirts and light collars. You guys.
Short sleeve, what can I say?
Durban winters are a wonderful thing to experience, as you know.
They are indeed. They are indeed. So I've been getting some good feedback about some of our podcasts. In fact, I had someone text me today and ask me the question, if I had 1 extra hour, what would I do? So, so that question is certainly out there and buzzing around. So that's good to know. So what we're talking about, in case anyone wanted to dial in for the first time, is our observations, or we're calling it the lockdown diary. Things that we're observing, things that we're involved in. So Mike and I were chatting earlier. Both of us are involved in coaching, and we coach our own staff and we coach other staff. And actually both of us today have been involved in some coaching. And we've been talking about the issue of trust, and that people have been highlighting to us that this has somehow highlighted the whole issue around trust. So let me throw the ball to you, Mikey, to start with. And do you want to, let's pick up our conversation of earlier and around this whole issue of trust.
Well, I think when it comes to trust, so many people don't trust other people. And I know there are some stats out there, but they're pretty high. And it's interesting, you can talk to many people and they will say something like this: I only trust a handful of people. What's always interesting is if you ask those same people, are you trustworthy? They will declare with a bold yes, of course I am.
Yeah.
And if most people in the world consider others to be non-trustworthy, we know the maths doesn't quite tie up. But trust is a great thing. Trust is a glue between in a team that makes them succeed. Simon Sinek's got that beautiful book, A Leader Eats Last, and he talks about that circle of trust. And if trust is strong, we can begin to focus on the external threats, external opportunities, and things like that. But trust is taking something that's valuable to yourself and putting it in the hands of another person, saying, I trust you with this. So here's the interesting thing. Here's the interesting thing. Micromanagement is something we're all familiar with, and there is a place for micromanagement in certain situations, but certainly not a great default management style, or according to me. If you're a micromanager, but now you can't micromanage your people in terms of looking over their shoulder and pointing out all the things that they're doing wrong, it's an interesting time that you're in. And so, Dave, he has just an interesting thought. Is micromanagement being possibly exposed? And there's a bit of a jury out on it right now, because people are having to manage in different ways.
So, I mean, this is fascinating, because I did a training session this morning on a thing called situational leadership, which is the ability to adapt and adopt differing styles of leadership to get the best out of where people are at, So I gave I used the analogy of, if you go to a house, you're a parent and you've got a 5-year-old, you've got a 15-year-old, and a 21-year-old. You can't lead them all the same. You have to tell the 5-year-old, go to bed at this time, do that, don't do this. You micromanage them, in effect. A 5-year-old, but you have to, because the 5-year-old isn't at the emotional state where they can make decisions. The 15-year-old needs more support and coaching type leadership, coming alongside and offering suggestions. And then the 21, 22-year-old, you'd hope, it's more of a delegating style of leadership, right? The trouble is,
you're giving them the keys,
Yeah. And so you're saying, look, let me come alongside. You're more collaborative in your leadership style. And so the problem is if you are not a person that easily adapts or adopts different types of leadership style, you quite likely would stay in what I would call the hierarchical model, which is a directing model, and it's micromanaging. So Now, you try doing that kind of leadership remotely. Try leading a 5-year-old as a parent remotely. Imagine trying having a video camera and then parenting a 5-year-old. You'd feel completely exasperated, right? But
Yeah.
so I'm sure this is how a lot of leaders of firms are feeling right now. This sense of panic, almost. How do I control my troops, as it were?
Well, this conversation I had with this guy today, it was a really great conversation because he was saying that them as regional managers or as national managers, they look over a whole big area. He says they've had to do most of their work from home, and this type of business has people on the ground who see the customer and work with the customer. And he said it's been quite interesting. We've had to just trust them. And my question to him was, well, have you been disappointed? And his response was, we haven't had one complaint.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the other beautiful part about it was, he says, my senior leaders are actually having to focus now on the work that they should be doing. And there is that sort of, it's probably got a term to it, I'm not too sure, but how so often people are operating a level below their title.
Exactly.
Yeah, because we like to put our hands into things.
Yeah.
But I just find it so fascinating. I know there will always be the exception of people whom you trust and they let you down. But I think there's something innate within us as human beings that if you are trusted, a majority step up and do what they now need to do. Yeah. So I agree with you. There is a time for micromanagement, and there is a time for watching other people. But imagine doing that to the 21-year-old.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you do that, it produces one of two things: rebels or robots. So if your leadership style has only been that, the tendency is people will always perform at the lowest common denominator. Now, this is an interesting. I had a long discussion with someone over this. There is an old saying that you must earn my trust. I would say that I would completely disagree with that, and I would say no. Trust is a gift that we all have that we can give to others. We can give our trust to others, and it put you in a place of vulnerability, right? I am entrusting you with something, and I'm, feeling a bit vulnerable about it, but I'm giving you the greatest gift. And 9 times out of 10, I would suggest people rise to those challenges. They rise to the challenge of taking on your trust. It's the same with respect. We said someone must earn my respect. No, I say no. You must give your respect. Give respect. And usually what's reciprocated is respect. Give trust, and what's reciprocated is often trust by the other person. I think this is thrusting people into a position where they have to give trust, where they have to give respect.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to trust, what we tend to do is we create systems and policies around the exception rather than around the majority. And I think it's sort of how our brains are wired. I once heard a neuroscientist say that when something negative happens to us, say I'm driving down the road and somebody cuts me off, the negative experience, he says, is like Velcro in our minds. It sticks to our minds. I don't need to think to myself, hey, Mike, remember this. Remember that guy cut you off. For the next 10, 15 minutes, my mind thinks about it. And later on that night, I might lie in bed and say, that oak who cut me off, you won't believe it. But when I'm on the road, there are a whole lot of people who are doing some wonderful acts of courtesy, kindness, letting me in, excusing my mistakes on the road. And now the neuroscientist terminologies, he says that's like Teflon. He says it goes through our brain just in and out. I don't for the next 10 minutes say, oh, what a lovely kind person who let me in. The world is such a good place. I don't think about that person at night.
Yeah.
And I think the same is of trust. There's a greater weight put on those who, on the one guy who doesn't come to work than the 9 people who do come to work.
Yeah.
and it sticks, and
It's
and I think
turning it
that's
around, isn't it? We've got to turn this around. That positive behavior is rewarded and is a stronger driver than negative behaviors, right? Um,
yeah.
and rewarding those positive behaviors. I love the fact that you say, unfortunately, most of our legislation is for the 1% or the 2% that are problematic. So
Yeah.
definitely leading a business in lockdown where everything is remote, your leadership style has to change. That goes without saying, I think. And I think probably if we were then to take it a notch down into the personal life, your parenting and your husbanding and your relational style probably has to change somewhat, being in captivity with your loved ones, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we should speak a little bit about that. I mean, the challenges that must be going on in people's homes right now, living with somebody in a lockdown condition.
Yeah, it's a big one. And I think we might have shared this before, but I think one of the big things of now working from home and doing everything from home is I suppose, to give cues to people of when you're in which mode. And I suppose boundary setting is probably key as well, because we can get highly irritated with each other because we're in each other's space. But you could have your work chair, and you could have another chair, which is that. When I take the hat off, it means I'm not in school anymore. You think of a 12-year-old, 13-year-old who's doing school from home. The hat means I'm in school. The hat off means, hey, Dad, you can come interrupt me. One of the biggest challenges might be is that we're going to be assuming that people know what's in our own head,
right?
And that's obviously going to lead to a little bit of conflict.
We've created we've created zones in our house. So there's the dining room table now as the work zone. So we leave the laptops out and screens out and stuff, and that's the work zone. So when we're sitting at this table, we're all in work mode, and there's a respect as if you would be in an office. And there's usually in this house 4 people working with computers now. And then we've designated the front room as the relaxing zone. No work. It's a no work zone. So there's these places you can go in the house that have different paradigms or rules attached to them, I think, and it's been very helpful.
Yeah, and as much as we're often trying to break down compartments, certain compartments keep us sane and keep a certainty. We've spoken quite a bit about certainty, and I think those are some of the things that you're going to have to do in those who are close to you, because so that you're building trust. But I think the big thing for me about trust is especially with those close to you, is communication. And we just got to keep talking. We've got to keep communicating. A nice question to maybe sit down every single meal with each other would be the question of, hey, just want to check in. How are us doing?
Yes.
How are us doing?
Yes.
And that can guide it. So you're right. It's a very different game. We're playing one game geographically where we're sitting, and then there's potentially a whole other game unfolding beyond us, where the rules are shifting and changing, and
we're living in these changing paradigms. We're trying to lead our companies and our staff remotely, and so we're trying to learn new ways of doing that and communicating. And in the same time, we're now living in very close proximity with people. Again, you can't micromanage someone that you're in close proximity with. Well, not for very long, unless you want to, shorten your life.
Yeah.
But I think there are lots of these challenges going on right
now. Yeah, but I'm just really excited, if we go back to the external one, that for many people, they might be given evidence that they can actually step up because their people are capable. In other words, transactional analysis terms, we can be adult to adult.
Yeah.
I realize that there will be exceptions, and some people will get let down by people. But for many people, maybe it's going to be this beautiful thing which says, hey, the people who work for me are really, really good. They're capable. They're deserving of my trust.
Yes. And that will spawn a whole new way of working. Like we said, the world isn't going to be the same again. And I think the world of remote working is going to become far more the norm than it has been.
And if you're the type of leader uh, whose ego is brushed by you having a whole lot of people that you walking around with and pointing and bringing into a room and almost displaying power, it could be a bit more difficult for you at the moment, and hopefully you can begin to lose that. So if you're the ego leader, and
exactly that, and where people get their sense of significance from.
That's the word I was looking for.
And I think, look, let's be honest, most A-type leaders do get their significance from having people around them and all of those trappings, and I guess it must be a very difficult time. And so I think that's where people need to, I'm going to use a phrase that you put here, people need to gain perspective of the situation and where they are and understand they need to derive significance from other things,
I think, and I know time's up, but the thought that's just come to my mind, we're going to need to be more like Andrea Bocelli, who can sing as well as he does, and there's not a single person in the audience.
Yes, audience of one.
And that doesn't take away from his ability to be a world-class performer, and so too with leadership. Can we lead without the people right there directly in front of us? Can we lead just as well, just as inspirationally, lead better? And they don't have to be in our proximity. It's, hey, I know you guys are still hearing this and you're still appreciating and still doing it.
And I would add to that, can we lead in our homes in a renewed way, where we are understanding the pressures on one another? And as you said, touching base, showing empathy, creating safe places to have discussion, even in a closed lockdown environment. Another really good chat. I think we've got themes that have come up. Communication, I think, would be good to talk about, and other themes. And I've also got some nice comments from viewers that we can have a look at and we will respond to as well. Thanks for listening, everyone, and look forward to chatting you soon. Okay, bye.